I'm Eliza Shepherd, and the day my family left me behind for Disneyland was the first time I realized I was easier to forget. While my sisters skipped into the car screaming about castles and churros, I sat with a packed suitcase, heading somewhere I hadn't chosen. Aunt Carol's tiny house, hours away. They thought they were sending me off quietly. They had no idea they were planting the seeds of their own reckoning. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I was 7 the first time I understood that fairness was optional in our house. It was early summer in Sacramento, hot enough to stick your legs to the vinyl car seats, loud with cicadas, and loudest of all with the squeals of my older sisters, Natalie and Brooke, bouncing around the living room like they'd won the lottery. "We're going to Disneyland," they shouted, nearly in sync. Mom clapped her hands to settle them, though her eyes glistened with amusement. "All right, girls, calm down before you break the furniture." And then she looked at me. "Eliza," she said, softer, almost guilty, "you'll be staying with Aunt Carol for the week." My stomach dropped. "But why?" "You're our calm one, sweetheart. Carol doesn't do well with too much noise. You'll be a breath of fresh air for her." Natalie smirked. "Try not to cry when we post from the castle." Brooke chimed in. "I'll tell Goofy you said hi. Oh, wait, maybe that's too much excitement for Aunt Carol." I didn't cry, though I felt something inside me fold up like a paper crane being crushed underfoot. I nodded once, too proud, even at 7, to beg, and walked down the hall to double-check the overnight bag I'd packed 3 days earlier when I still believed I was going to. I remember my hands trembling as I zipped the suitcase shut. In the car ride to Carol's, my mother hummed along to the radio as if nothing had happened. No big deal. Just Eliza being farmed out like spare furniture. Aunt Carol greeted us in her driveway wearing garden gloves and smelling faintly of tomato plants and cinnamon tea. "Why, hello, my little lady," she said, crouching to my eye level. "I've cleared a shelf in the guest room just for your books." "She's a quiet one," Mom said, as if that were some sort of defect. Carol's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "Quiet is good. Quiet lets you listen better." Back in the car, my mother waved once and was gone. No goodbye hug, no have fun. Just the hum of tires disappearing down the road. Inside, Carol showed me the shelf she'd cleared, the jar of marbles she used to track wins in our future chess games, and the teacups lined neatly by the window. "Want to see where the squirrels sneak onto the fence?" she asked, and I followed her to the back porch, trying to steady the ache in my chest. I didn't know it yet, but this would be the beginning of everything. The moment when I stopped asking for a seat at the table and started building my own. Aunt Carol's house in Santa Rosa felt like a different planet. There were no chore charts taped to the fridge, no shrieking matches over hair straighteners, no sarcastic jabs thrown across the dinner table like darts. Just a soft hum of old jazz, a back porch painted mint green, and Carol, who never raised her voice and always looked you in the eye when you spoke. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the quiet. There was no one interrupting me. No sister shoving me aside to be the center of attention. Carol simply handed me a book, or pointed to a puzzle, or taught me how to slice cucumbers thin for our sandwiches. Every night after dinner, she'd set up the chess board with this little crooked smile. "White or black tonight?" she'd ask, holding out the pawns like they were lucky stones. I always picked white, not because I cared about the first move, but because it made me feel like the game might go differently than the rest of my life. At first, I lost every single time. Carol was ruthless, quietly so. No mercy moves, no fake encouragements, just a gentle check and a clean capture of my queen. But she always explained the lesson. "Look 3 moves ahead, not just 1. That's how you stay in control, even when it feels like you're losing." Funny how a board game could feel more fair than a family. In the mornings, she'd drink her bitter black coffee while reading stock reports. I didn't understand the numbers, just that she always looked satisfied, like she was reading a story only she understood. One day I asked her what she was doing. She folded the paper and slid it over to me. "This is what I do for work. I help people grow their money by making smart choices. Risk isn't always bad, it's just better when it's informed." I blinked at her. "You can grow money," Carol grinned. "You can make it work for you, Eliza. It's not about chasing after more. It's about being smart with what you have. One day, you'll understand compound interest better than any Prince Charming. We spent the rest of that morning drawing out fake portfolios with crayons and calculator apps. She let me pick fake companies, Eliza's Lemonade Empire and Robot Zoo Inc., then walked me through how investments rise and fall. It was thrilling in a way that Disneyland never had been. There were no lines, no overpriced souvenirs, just the quiet thrill of learning how to win a game that actually mattered. The next few days blurred into routine. Morning walks where Carol pointed out which houses were owned outright and which were mortgaged. Look at the lawn. If they're spending more than they earn, the grass always gives them away. Afternoon garden work, evening books, and chess. No one asked me to be less. No one made me feel like a placeholder. It wasn't that I stopped missing my parents or sisters. I did. I wondered if they thought of me at all between churros and castle selfies. If they felt even an ounce of guilt for leaving me behind. But I never called, and they never checked in. Somewhere between losing my third bishop and learning how dividends worked, I stopped expecting them to. Carol noticed. "You okay, Bug?" she asked one night as I stared out the window while she brewed tea. I shrugged. "I'm just used to being the side character." Carol placed the teapot down carefully. "Eliza, listen to me. The people who overlook you now might not recognize the woman you'll become. But that's not your burden to fix, it's their loss to live with." It was the first time an adult had ever said something like that to me. Not be grateful or stop making everything a big deal. Just an acknowledgement that my pain was real, and that I didn't have to earn my place by being quiet and small. That night, I beat her at chess for the first time. It wasn't a fluke. I trapped her queen early, sacrificed my rook mid-game, and checkmated her with a knight in under 30 moves. Carol leaned back in her chair, eyebrows raised, then gave me a slow clap. "You've been paying attention," she said. I smiled for the first time in days, not because I'd won, but because I realized I'd started to understand the rules, not just of chess, but of everything. I was 28 when Carol died. It happened on a Sunday morning in early April, just after she'd trimmed the rose bushes. The neighbors said she'd been humming as she came in from the yard, set her clippers down on the kitchen counter, and quietly collapsed. A stroke, the doctors said, fast and merciful, but nothing about it felt merciful to me. I stood at the front of the church in a navy blue suit, not black. Carol had hated black. She always said it drained the color from a person's soul. Beside me, a polished wooden casket sat closed, draped in white lilies and sage, and behind me a room full of stunned faces. Half of them didn't even know who I was. "She had a niece," one woman whispered as I walked up the aisle. Another leaned in. "Wasn't she the one Carol always talked about during poker night?" My parents sat near the back. My sisters were there too. Natalie checking her phone, Brooke blinking hard like she couldn't decide if this counted as a tragedy or just an inconvenience. No one came up to me directly. No condolences, just curious glances and hushed judgment. Carol had no children, no husband. She'd lived simply but invested quietly. Most assumed her wealth, if any, would go to some foundation or distant cousin. But when the lawyer pulled me aside after the service and handed me a thick folder with my name printed in clean serif font, my hands went cold. "Eliza Shepherd," he said gently. "I'm John Vickers, Carol's estate attorney. We should talk." We sat in a quiet side room of the church. I clutched the folder as he explained. Carol had left everything to me, not just the house. Not just the old Prius still parked in her garage, but her boutique investment firm, her entire portfolio, her legacy. "She referred to you as her only real heir," he said, sliding a letter across the table. "She wanted you to have the tools to build your own future." I opened the letter, my fingers trembling. "Eliza," it began in her looping handwriting, "you saw value in the quiet parts of life. That's where real power lives. Don't let anyone shrink you back down now." I didn't cry until I got back to her house. It smelled the same lemongrass soap and old books, but it was too still. The garden gate squeaked just as she'd left it. The chess board was half set like she'd been mid-game with herself, and the last cup of tea she ever made had left a faint ring on the side table. I sat down on the porch step and let the tears fall freely. It wasn't just grief. It was the aching realization that she had seen me, believed in me, When the rest of the world only saw a footnote, she'd quietly written me into the center of her story. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Jenna. "Wait, you're the sole beneficiary, even the firm." I didn't respond, but I watched as the family chat thread exploded. She didn't even raise Eliza. Why wouldn't she leave anything to her siblings? Maybe there's a mistake in the will. And then the one that stung the most from my own mother. Carol always had a flair for dramatics. Eliza's not equipped for this. She'll sink the whole thing in a month. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything. I simply powered off my phone and went to bed. Let them doubt me. Let them fume. Because whether they liked it or not, Carol had handed me the board, and I was about to make my move. The first time I walked into the boardroom of Shepherd Equity Group, I felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes, skeptical, curious, politely bracing for disappointment. It was all glass and chrome, with the smell of espresso and quiet ambition thick in the air. Most of them had worked under Aunt Carol for years. Some had helped her build the firm from scratch. Others had Ivy League MBAs and the kind of handshake confidence that comes from generational wealth. And now here I was, Carol's bookish niece from Sacramento, according to the whisper I overheard by the espresso machine. I wore a tailored gray blazer and the exact shade of lipstick Carol once told me said, "Don't mistake my silence for weakness." I had notes in my folder, but I didn't need them. When I stood at the head of the long marble table, I didn't ask for permission. I began. "I know what some of you are thinking," I said evenly. "I didn't earn this. I'm the girl who got lucky in a will. I'm not offended. It's exactly what my family thinks, too." The room was quiet, save for a few polite coughs. "But you know who did believe I was capable," I said, placing my palms flat on the table. "Carol, and she didn't make bets she wasn't willing to back." That got their attention. I clicked the small remote in my hand and a spreadsheet lit up the wall behind me. Clear numbers. Strong returns. Solid direction. Over the last 6 months, Carol and I worked closely on restructuring our mid-risk portfolio. We quietly exited 3 unstable positions and reallocated into renewable infrastructure and adaptive tech. Those plays, they returned 12% over benchmark last quarter. I paused. A few eyebrows rose. Someone whispered, "She was already working with Carol." I kept going. Shepherd Equity was never just about short-term wins. Carol played the long game like any good strategist. And if you're still worried I can't lead, that's fair, but give me 90 days, watch what happens. The silence that followed was tight but not unfriendly. Then one of the firm's veterans, a man named Curtis with a permanent frown and an expensive watch, leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure what to expect," he said, "but that was solid." It wasn't praise exactly, but it wasn't dismissal either. That afternoon, I stayed late with the analytics team, reviewing models. I asked questions, not to prove myself, just to learn. When I didn't know something, I admitted it and wrote it down. When I did, I explained my reasoning clearly and backed it with data. By the end of the week, we landed a small but impressive market win. Nothing flashy, just a well-timed maneuver that turned an undervalued tech fund into a portfolio standout. The staff buzzed with cautious excitement. "She's not Carol," one of the senior associates said near the elevators. "But she's not trying to be. That might be even better." I walked through the lobby that Friday afternoon, heels clicking, heart pounding with quiet adrenaline, not because I had proven myself yet, but because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone to hand me permission to try. This time, I was already playing the game, and I knew exactly where the pieces were. I thought success would soften them. That maybe walking into my parents' house carrying a quiet fortune and sleek designer bags would somehow shift the way they looked at me, like I finally mattered. It didn't. The night of the dinner party, I drove back to the house I grew up in with my trunk full of carefully chosen gifts. Handbags from a French boutique in Soho. Luxurious, thoughtful, personal. One for each of my sisters, monogrammed. I'd even picked a shawl for my mother, woven Italian silk in her favorite shade of dusty rose. Part of me still wanted their approval. I know I shouldn't have. Not after the years of being overlooked, minimized, rerouted. But old wounds do strange things to hope. "Just dinner," I told myself as I rang the bell. "Just a gesture." The door opened. Brooke was first. Her eyes dropped immediately to the shopping bags in my hand. "Did someone rob a Fifth Avenue window display?" she said, grinning. Natalie followed, her mouth twisting. "Wow, Eliza, showing off much." "Hi," I said, keeping my voice light. "It's good to see you." Our mother appeared behind them, wiping her hands on a linen napkin. "You didn't need to bring anything, sweetheart," she said, her tone smooth as porcelain. "It's just family." I forced a smile. "I wanted to. These are for you." I handed the shawl to her. She turned it over once, politely unimpressed. "Lovely," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. Brooke tore open her bag with the finesse of a toddler at Christmas. "Ooh, is this real?" "Like real. It's from Mason Morrow," I said. "They just opened in the States." Natalie scoffed. "What, trying to buy us off now that you're suddenly Wall Street?" I stared at her. "No," I said, "just trying to reconnect." They laughed like I'd told a joke. Our father entered the room with a bottle of wine and poured everyone glasses except me. I held up my hand. "No, thank you." He looked surprised. "Still trying to be different, huh?" The dinner table was the same scratched mahogany I remembered, the same lace runner down the middle. The food smelled familiar: garlic chicken, roasted carrots, undersalted rice, but the air was brittle. They talked about Natalie's new car lease, Brooke's hairstylist, Mom's friend who'd just retired to a golf community in Arizona. No one asked about the firm. No one mentioned Carol. I tried once. "We had our first quarterly win this week," I said. "Our new hybrid portfolio strategy is paying off." "Oh," Mom replied. "That's nice, dear." Then she turned to Brooke. "You said your apartment flooded again." By dessert, the bags had disappeared into their rooms, and I felt like a courier who dropped off offerings no one had asked for. I stood in the kitchen afterward, loading the dishwasher, while the others sat back in the living room scrolling on their phones. "I guess I thought I don't know," I said out loud to no one. "Thought what?" Natalie asked without looking up. "That maybe things would be different now." She laughed, bitter and bright. "Just because you're rich doesn't make you interesting, Eliza." That was when I realized. Nothing had changed. Not their tone, not their dismissal, not the way they made me feel 12 years old again, too quiet to matter. And money, real money, Carol-level money, didn't impress them, because they'd already decided who I was, and who I wasn't. As I gathered my coat and keys, Brooke looked up. "You heading out already? Thought you'd stay for more humble bragging." I stared at her. "No, I have work tomorrow. Some of us run companies now." Her face twitched just slightly, like she'd caught the insult but couldn't figure out how to swing back. At the door, our mom kissed my cheek airlight. "Don't be a stranger." I nodded. But as I stepped out into the cool night, I knew I would never, ever walk back into that house hoping they'd see me. That part of me was done. Back in my office, with the door closed and the blinds drawn, I stared at the final spreadsheet. The number was real. $5.5 million. Liquid. That was what the sale of our firm's most strategic asset, Carol's original core fund, had brought in. The buyout came faster than expected, the deal cleaner than most. I'd negotiated it myself, quietly, while everyone was too busy watching the S&P wobble. "Are you sure about this?" My assistant, Dana, asked as I signed the wire transfer request. "I'm sure," she hesitated. "You don't want it distributed across the usual portfolios?" "No." "You want to," she squinted at the paperwork, "hand-deliver it." I nodded. There was a long pause. Dana, ever composed, smoothed her blazer and said only, "Do you want security with you?" "No, but thank you." I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. "This isn't just a delivery, it's a test." She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted her. The duffel bags arrived an hour later, 6 of them, black canvas, unmarked. Inside, neatly bundled cash and high-denomination bills, labeled and verified by the bank's armored transport division. I sat with them alone for a few minutes. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about what the money meant. For years, I had been treated like an extra, an afterthought. Not just by my family, but by the very structures they worshipped. Wealth, status, image. And yet here I was, the quiet niece, the overlooked girl, now the one holding power. But power means nothing unless you know where to place it. I zipped the bags back shut and made the call. "Good morning," I said calmly into the phone. "I'd like to schedule a walk-in deposit at Sierra Guardian Trust. Yes, under my name. Yes, it's large. No, I don't want a vault. I want the director to be aware. I ended the call before they could ask more questions. The next morning, I dressed with precision. Navy trousers, a silk blouse the color of storm clouds, and a trench coat Carol once told me made me look like I had better places to be than anyone else in the room. I left the office without fanfare. But I didn't bring the full $5.5 million. I brought $100. A single crisp bill, folded twice and tucked into my wallet. That was the point. Sierra Guardian Trust had one of the most exclusive reputations in the state. Generational wealth, old money, tailored smiles. It was also where my sister Melissa had started working a year ago. Last I'd heard, she was some mid-level account liaison with a smug streak the size of Napa County. I wanted to see something. No, I wanted them to see something. And then I'd show them the rest. The lobby of Sierra Guardian Trust gleamed like the inside of a pearl. Polished marble. Gold fixtures. A waterfall wall that burbled quietly near the receptionist's desk, like money had its own frequency and only the rich could hear it. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and furniture polish. I stepped inside holding a small black envelope. The receptionist didn't even glance up from her computer until I cleared my throat. "Yes," she asked, with the flat disinterest reserved for people in polyester. "I'd like to make a deposit." Her eyes flicked up, registering my blouse and bag with a speed honed by class gatekeeping. She leaned forward, smile manufactured. "Do you have an account with us?" "Not yet." Her smile faltered. "What's the amount?" I handed over the envelope containing a single $100 bill. She opened it, paused, and blinked. "I see," she said, tone frosting over. "One moment." She picked up the phone and mumbled something, then motioned me toward a side counter. "Someone will assist you shortly." I waited exactly 90 seconds before the glass door behind the counter buzzed open. And there she was, Melissa, my older sister, once the family's golden child. Now a tight-blazered trust liaison with the exact kind of smile that could kill slowly. "Eliza," she purred, stepping forward on red-bottomed heels. "What a surprise." "Hello, Melissa." She glanced at the envelope on the counter and let out a small, controlled laugh. The kind she used at country club brunches. "We don't usually process deposits that small in person. You could have used the ATM. I wanted to come in. To deposit $100. Her voice was louder now, loud enough that the two staffers behind the desk looked up. "That's adorable." I said nothing. She leaned in, eyes sparkling with faux sympathy. "Eliza, honey, we don't serve poor people, not here." There it was, loud, on purpose, delivered like a punchline. I heard someone behind me snort. Another staffer tried, poorly, to hide a smirk. Melissa flipped her hair back and stepped behind the teller counter like she'd won something. I pulled the envelope back toward me. "That was a test deposit," I said calmly, placing it back into my coat pocket. "Please wait a moment." And then I reached for my phone. She blinked. "Excuse me." I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a single message to the armored team waiting 2 blocks away. Now, it took exactly 4 minutes. The lobby doors swung open and 2 suited security guards entered, flanking a dolly cart stacked with 6 duffel bags. All black, all zipped, all marked. The receptionist rose so fast her chair rolled back. Someone gasped. Melissa stepped forward. "What is this?" I handed her the official deposit notice already notarized. "My full deposit," I said quietly. $5.5 million. Please initiate processing." Her face drained of color. The guards remained silent, standing beside the bags like silent reminders that wealth didn't always dress the part. I turned back to Melissa, whose lips had parted but formed no words. "Would you like to repeat what you just said to me?" I asked. She swallowed. I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't." A long, aching silence filled the marble lobby. Phones buzzed quietly. One employee half stood, unsure whether to run or apologize. Melissa tried again. "Eliza, wait." But I had already pulled out a second card. "I'll be speaking directly with your director now. Please inform Mr. Whitlock that Eliza Shepard is here, and that your team is due for a performance review." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The money did that for me. For a full 15 seconds, no one moved. The duffel bags sat like silent witnesses to everything Melissa had just said. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out, just a flicker of the smug confidence that had evaporated the moment she saw the zeros in the deposit paperwork. I could see her calculating, scrambling, trying to figure out how to backpedal without admitting anything out loud. "I didn't mean what I said," she began, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I turned my head toward the front desk. "Would you please contact Mr. Whitlock?" The receptionist, now visibly rattled, nodded and reached for the phone. She wouldn't meet my eyes, no one would. Melissa clutched a tablet against her chest like a shield. "Eliza, this doesn't have to become a thing," she said, her voice dropping to a private register as she stepped closer. But I didn't move. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Not here." I looked her over, slow and deliberate. "You already did," I replied. And then I turned away from her entirely, nothing dramatic, just calm dismissal. The kind that lands harder than any shouting ever could. A few minutes later, a tall man in a deep navy suit appeared from the side corridor, his stride brisk and controlled. I recognized him from the firm's LinkedIn briefing on Sierra Guardian. Martin Whitlock, managing director, reputation obsessed, publicly neutral, privately ruthless. He took one look at the lobby scene, the bags, the frozen staff, Melissa's pale face, and instantly reset his expression. "Ms. Shepherd," he said, stepping forward with a practiced smile. "It's an honor. I wasn't aware you'd be coming in person." I extended my hand. Under the circumstances, I felt it was appropriate. Melissa tried to slink behind him, but I caught her movement. "Before we proceed," I said smoothly, "I'd like to speak with you privately about your staff." Whitlock blinked just once, then gestured toward the glass-walled conference room down the hall. "This way, please." We walked in silence. Once the door closed behind us, I handed him a folded document, 3 printed pages of a formal complaint. Itemized, dated, time-stamped, signed, every word of what Melissa had said, every smirk, every staff member who heard it and laughed. Whitlock read fast. His jaw flexed once at the edges. "I assure you," he said when he finished, "this is absolutely not in line with our values." "It's not about your values," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's about your front-facing staff being trained to equate wealth with worth, and to weaponize appearance as permission." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he nodded. "You're right." I appreciated that no deflection, no excuse. "I'm requesting a full internal review," I continued. "And until then, I want my account handled by a third-party fiduciary within your oversight." "Of course. I'd also prefer," I added, "that Melissa be suspended pending that review." His face didn't change, but he made a note on the pad in front of him. "I'll handle it immediately." We shook hands. As we exited the conference room, Melissa looked up from her desk, her posture visibly stiff. When her eyes met mine, she froze, expecting perhaps some final jab or smug look. But I gave her nothing. No reaction, no parting insult, just the silence she used to fill with her own narrative. Now that silence belonged to me. The morning after Melissa was suspended, I got up before sunrise. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to be wide awake for this day, for the rare, weighty feeling of quiet justice settling where rage used to live. I brewed a cup of black tea, the way Carol always liked it. No sugar, just heat and clarity. Then I slipped into a slate-gray blazer, pulled my hair back into a clean twist, and walked into the office with the kind of calm that doesn't come from being in control, but from knowing you no longer have to ask for it. Dana was already waiting at my desk, her usual composed expression warmed by a flicker of anticipation. "They sent over the revised documents," she said, handing me a thick envelope. "Final signatures. The trust is ready for activation as soon as you give the word." I took the packet in both hands and opened it slowly. The pages inside were smooth, heavyweight, expensive, like they understood the gravity of what they were being asked to hold. Carol would have appreciated that. She never made a fuss about luxury, but she always said, "If you're going to bind something permanent, make sure the paper doesn't apologize for existing." This trust wasn't just a financial move. It was a boundary in legal form, a declaration of sovereignty, and a promise, one I intended to keep. I read every line carefully. The structure was clean. Asset protection clauses, board oversight thresholds, reinvestment stipulations with sustainability lock-ins. But the part I paused at, the part that made something twist quietly in my chest, was the final clause. Named legacy, Carol D. Shepard Memorial Endowment for Female-First Financial Initiatives. I swallowed. My fingers hovered over the line, tracing her name before signing mine beside it. It was done. The firm I inherited was now the foundation of something she'd only hinted at, late at night over chess matches and half-drunk tea. "You won't need to be loud," she once told me after I won a game with a quiet pawn advance. "You'll just need to be undeniable." And now I was. Dana stood to leave but hesitated at the door. "Eliza, can I ask something?" I looked up. "Always." She closed the door behind her and sat across from me, folding her hands in her lap. "That whole scene yesterday, Melissa, the bags, the confrontation, you planned all of it, didn't you?" I didn't answer right away. I sipped my tea, watching the steam curl in lazy loops toward the ceiling. "I didn't plan her reaction," I said, "but I knew who she was, and I knew what kind of story would make people listen." Dana tilted her head slightly. "So the $100. A mirror," I said. "I wanted to show her and everyone else what they really think when they don't think they're being watched." She nodded slowly. "It worked," I exhaled. "Melissa grew up in the same house I did. She knows what it's like to be small, but somewhere along the way she decided it was better to side with the people who make others feel small." Dana looked down at her hands. "Do you think she meant it, what she said?" "I think she didn't think she'd be held accountable." There was a pause, then Dana leaned forward slightly. "So, what happens now?" I looked out the window. Below us, the city hummed with its usual buzz, trains moving, cars honking, people in suits rushing to things they thought were urgent. But up here, it felt like everything had slowed. "She's suspended," I said. "Her file is under review. Mr. Whitlock made it clear they're taking it seriously." "Will she be fired?" I shrugged. "That's up to them, but this," I tapped the trust document, "this was never about her." Dana frowned. "It wasn't." "No," I said, "it was about me. Taking back power." "No," I said again and smiled faintly. "Showing I never lost it." Dana stood to leave, then paused again. "For what it's worth, I've worked under some impressive women, but you're different." I didn't respond. Compliments still landed awkwardly in me, like they had nowhere to go, but I appreciated the intent. When she left, I sat with the papers for a long while, not because I doubted anything, but because there was something satisfying about holding your legacy in your hands. Not inherited, not gifted, chosen. The dinner invitation arrived 2 days after the trust was finalized, a group text. No explanation, just a bland "dinner Sunday at 6, family only, hope you can come." I stared at it for a full minute before replying, sure. No emojis, no warmth, just enough civility to keep the peace. I knew what it was. They wanted to talk, to contain it. To scold me, maybe. More likely to make it about them again. How they looked, how they felt, how I'd embarrassed the family by refusing to stay small and quiet. I wore black this time. Not out of mourning, but strategy, because it absorbs light. And I didn't want to give them any of mine. When I stepped through the front door of my parents' house, the scent hit me first. Roast beef, potatoes, something too heavy for October. My mother always cooked when she wanted control. It made things look normal. "Right on time," she said, pecking my cheek like a stamp. "We're just about to sit." Natalie and Brooke were already at the table, flipping through their phones like it was a board meeting they couldn't be bothered to attend. Melissa was there too. Suspended, yes, but apparently still invited. She didn't look at me, and I didn't offer her anything, not a nod, not a smile, not even the common courtesy of acknowledgement. I just sat down, smoothed my napkin, and waited. The meal was quiet for the first 5 minutes. Too quiet. My father cleared his throat. "So Melissa told us what happened." I didn't look up. "Did she?" "She said you humiliated her," my mother added sharply, slicing her meat with unnecessary force. "At her job, in public." "Not in public," I replied. "In the lobby of her workplace, which she chose as the stage." Natalie snorted. "So you're just out here playing God now?" "No," I said, still calm. "I'm playing chess, the way I was taught." My mother dropped her fork with a clatter. "You don't see anything wrong with what you did." I set mine down slowly. "What I did," I said, meeting her eyes, "was refuse to shrink again after a lifetime of being asked to." The room tensed. Melissa finally looked up, her voice thinner than I remembered. You made me look like a fool. I turned to her. No, Melissa, you did that. I simply let the truth land where it was already headed. My father leaned in, brows drawn. You exposed your own sister. No, I said again, voice sharper now. I exposed a behavior, one that's lived in this family for years, one you've all benefited from. Silence. Thick, uncomfortable. Then, from the far end of the table, a voice I didn't expect. April, the youngest of us, quiet, often overlooked, even more than me. She hadn't said a word all evening. Eliza's the only one who's ever treated me like I mattered, she said quietly. Maybe we all need to stop pretending we deserve her silence. Every head turned toward her. She didn't flinch. My mother opened her mouth, stunned. My father blinked like he didn't understand the words. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Brooke looked vaguely betrayed. But Melissa looked gutted. April stood up. She's building something, not just for herself, for all of us if we wanted it. But instead of seeing that, you've all been too busy defending your pride to admit she's the one holding this family together. I stared at her, shocked. Not by what she said, but that she'd chosen to say it here. Now, to them, the room crackled. No one moved. Then I reached for my water glass, took a slow sip, and looked directly at my parents. You raised me to be quiet, I said. Carol raised me to be strategic. Guess which one worked? No one argued. No one could. And I finally understood that this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And I had finally said it out loud. The silence after I spoke wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Like the kind of silence that hangs in the air after a door has been slammed and everyone is pretending they didn't hear it. Except this time, there was no denying what had just happened. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't insulted anyone. But I had laid down the one thing no one in this family ever wanted to deal with: truth, served cold. My father cleared his throat again, like he could clear the discomfort from the room, too. You embarrassed your sister, he muttered, quieter now. There were witnesses. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with him. Melissa embarrassed herself, I said, calm and clear. I simply stopped covering for her. That landed like a thunderclap. Melissa stiffened beside him, her mouth tightening, but she didn't speak. I could tell she needed to. But her ammunition had already misfired in public, and the cost was still echoing in her career. I picked up my fork and cut another piece of chicken. Chewed, swallowed, then set it back down with precision. Across the table, April leaned forward, voice soft but unwavering. She's right. Eliza's always been the one who shows up, for everyone, even when none of you noticed. My mother's face hardened. Don't turn this into some martyr story. No, April said, shaking her head. It's not, it's just the truth. You sent her away over and over, and she still came back every time hoping you'd treat her like she mattered. I never, my mother started, then stopped, her jaw clenched. You did, I said gently, but I'm not angry about it anymore. I meant it. It surprised even me how much I meant it. I'm not here for revenge or redemption. I'm here because I don't need your approval anymore. And that, I added, might be the most dangerous thing I've ever had. Natalie finally looked up from her phone. God, Eliza, is this your TED Talk moment? No, I said. This is me outgrowing the version of myself you were all comfortable ignoring. My father looked tired now, as if the weight of his indifference had finally started to ache. You always wanted so much, he muttered. No, I said, shaking my head. I wanted equal. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted someone to notice that I was learning, growing, succeeding, even if it didn't look like what you valued. Brooke shifted in her seat. You think you're better than us now? No, I said, softer this time. I think I'm finally better to myself. And then, for the first time all night, I let the silence settle. No one interrupted. No one challenged me, because the truth was undeniable now, etched into the air like a line that would never be unsaid. After a long moment, April reached into her bag and pulled something out, a thin, worn book. She slid it across the table toward Melissa. Melissa blinked, confused. What is this? Aunt Carol's copy of The Intelligent Investor, April said. Eliza said it changed the way she saw everything. You asked for help, didn't you? Melissa looked at the book like it was in a foreign language. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her pride was still trying to build a wall between her and the offer. I'm not giving you charity, I said quietly. But if you're ready to learn, I'll teach you. I'll start you at the beginning just like Carol did with me. The table was still, listening. Melissa finally reached out and picked up the book, not dramatically, not tearfully, just took it, held it, and something shifted in her face, not regret exactly, but recognition. A mirror finally seen. I'm sorry, she said, her voice small but real. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And for the first time, I believed it. Some changes don't arrive like thunder. They come in hushed steps, like spring creeping back into the edges of winter. Quiet, persistent, unapologetic, that's how it was after the dinner. No dramatic family overhaul, no weepy confessions, just a slight difference in the way they looked at me, like I wasn't invisible anymore. And more importantly, like they knew I wouldn't allow myself to be. Melissa emailed me first. A short message. No flair. No excuses. Subject about the book I've started it. I had to Google some of the terms, but I'm making notes. Would you be open to lunch next week? I'd like to ask you a few things in person. No weirdness. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't owe her anything. And I certainly wasn't eager to play therapist for a sister who'd once smirked at my silence. But this wasn't about the past. It was about what she was willing to build now. I replied with one word. Yes. That Friday, we sat across from each other at a small cafe with uneven tables and good espresso. She looked different, less armory, more open. She had a worn copy of The Intelligent Investor in her bag, sticky notes sticking out like bookmarks of questions. Compound interest feels like magic, she said without preamble. I smiled. It is if you respect it. She nodded. I think I wasted a lot of years trying to look powerful instead of being it. I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. That was the start. Small, deliberate lunches, honest questions, real effort. It wasn't perfect. Some days she was defensive or overly performative. But for the first time, she wasn't treating my knowledge like a threat. She was treating it like a ladder. And then came April. She showed up at my office on a Thursday morning with her resume in hand. I know I don't have the experience, she said nervously, but I've been studying, and I'd really like to learn, with you. I reviewed her resume silently, then looked up. You're hired, she gasped. Really? Internship for now, I said, smiling. You'll be the only one who doesn't call me Eliza in meetings. April rolled her eyes. Deal. We started her off small, portfolio tagging, shadowing client calls, learning market language. She soaked it up like water in drought. I caught her reading Carol's old newsletters in the break room, circling paragraphs in pen. She was so ahead of her time, she whispered once. She still is, I said. And slowly something began to form, not a dynasty, not a drama, but a working legacy. Melissa helped me organize a financial literacy night at a community center in Folsom. April came with a slide deck and a nervous smile, but spoke with clarity that made older women in the room nod and scribble notes like she was teaching gold. Afterward, one of them approached me and said, Your daughters are incredible. I smiled. They're my sisters. Oh, she blinked. Well, lucky them. I thought about that for a while. Lucky them. Maybe, but luck didn't build this. Choice did. Effort did. Boundaries and discomfort and the kind of forgiveness that doesn't erase the past but refuses to be ruled by it. The next week, we stood together in the firm's conference room, Melissa, April, and me, reviewing a proposal to expand our Women in Finance initiative. I think we should rename it, Melissa said quietly. Not just Shepherd Equity Women's Fund. Something with meaning. I turned to her, surprised. She hesitated, then looked at me. What about Carol's Ladder? April smiled instantly. That's perfect. And it was, because it wasn't just a name. It was a story, one we were finally writing together. 2 years later, I stood at a podium in downtown San Francisco, staring into a sea of faces illuminated by chandeliers. The Trust Women Gala. I had practiced the speech, rehearsed the pauses, the smile, the final line. But none of that prepared me for the moment my eyes landed on the front row. Melissa, in navy silk, her badge clipped beside her, now a junior partner in a competing firm's women's mentorship wing. She caught my gaze and nodded, steady, respectful. Next to her, April, twirling her pen, holding a notepad she didn't need anymore but carried out of habit. The intern who became our youngest full-time analyst last month. And on the seat between them, placed gently on the cushion, was a small velvet box. Carol's chest set queen bone white, perfectly carved, resting like a totem. The women behind me stepped forward, clearing their throats, waiting for my cue. I didn't start with numbers. I didn't start with the legacy fund or the 300-plus scholarships we now helped sponsor. I started with a story. When I was 7, I was told I was too quiet to enjoy Disneyland, so they sent me somewhere else. Soft laughter rippled from the front, the kind that comes from people who understand that a joke can hold a scar. I didn't ride roller coasters that summer. I played chess, learned interest rates, read books about bonds and dividend yields. I didn't know it then, but I was being handed something much bigger than a ride. I paused. A ladder. The room stilled. I let them sit with it. You see, when women aren't invited to the table, they build their own. When they're told they're too small, too quiet, too emotional, they don't shrink. They watch, they learn, they prepare. I saw someone in the back wipe away a tear. Carol taught me that success doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it builds, and it does so in rooms where no one expects it. I took a breath, let my voice soften. 2 years ago, I deposited $100 at a bank, not because I needed to, but because I needed to see who they were when they thought I wasn't worth noticing. Laughter. Knowing, gentle. They failed that test, but it gave me the proof I needed to trust something far more powerful, my instincts. I looked at April. Now I see a generation of young women who will never need that test. I glanced down at the cards in front of me, then pushed them aside. I had a speech written. I had slides. I had all the stats you expect at a gala like this. Pause, beat. But none of that matters as much as this. You don't have to be the loudest at the table to lead. You just have to build something so undeniable they can't look away. The applause came slowly, then stronger, standing, sustained. When I stepped off stage, Melissa pulled me into a one-armed hug. "You killed it," she whispered. April just grinned. "You didn't even cry," I laughed. "Not yet." Later, after the photos and the toasts and the slow exhale of a long-held breath, I returned to the velvet box on my table. The queen piece still sat there, gleaming faintly in the ballroom light. I picked it up, held it for a second, then slipped it into my pocket. She never needed a castle. She built a firm. She built me. And now I was building for others. One ladder, one game, one quiet move at a time.